Hello, hello, hello. 3 books for you today. I have a lot to say, but the rain might come, so I better be swift about this. The first one up is The Turnglass by Gareth Rubin, which comes to us from Simon & Schuster. And it's what they call a tête-bêche novel, which means head foot. So it's one of those ones, I should have shown you that really, that you can read in either direction. Basically, 2 stories that meet in the middle. One is set in the 1880s on the Essex coast, and the other one is set in 1930s California. Now, I picked it up partly because, yeah, that's a really interesting sort of, format and experimentation and all of that's great, and was more than pleasantly surprised because, yeah, it's one thing to have a sort of something novel, something new like that, and it's not the first tête-bêche. This was quite a popular, common thing, even with your missal. You'd have your Bible on one side and your hymns on the other. So it's a format that's been used quite often. It's also got to, fulfill all the other criteria, as you know, for good writing or great writing and great content, and ticked all of those boxes. I was intrigued. I suppose what I really like about this novel is that when you read one story, let's say I started with the 1880s, where we have a young doctor who has come, called Simeon Lee, who's come out to a small island on the Sussex coast with one of those sort of slightly Gothic-y houses where his cousin, an ailing parson, Oliver Hall, believes he's been poisoned. And it very much looks like he is. And in this house lives his sister-in-law, Florence, who's kind of kept captive. And basically read it too. It's very intriguing. And we go through this story that we're on the coast. There are people who do smuggling. Is this parson really being poisoned? And follows a whole sort of series of stories. Florence, who is kind of held captive in this place, gives him a book to read, which tells him a story. So we've got stories within stories. And when you flip, this is all very exciting. There are all sorts of facts. Did Florence, she's been accused of murder. Did she do that? There's another body in the marshes, and how did they die? And there's a sort of journey up to London to see where did fallen women go to. It's got everything. When you turn the other side, we're in 1930s California, and this Oliver took he's an author. He lives in great wealth. His family has created a fortune out of glass and, glass making windows. And he has written a kind of a novel that people, you feel, are sort of trying to suppress, maybe, members of his own family, but that it retraces the steps of Simeon Lee. You read one, and when you get to the end of it and you read the other one, it starts undoing everything that you thought you understood. And it made me want to go round again, to say, hang on a minute, I missed that bit. So it's sort of like a thriller detective, look for the clues, Cain's jawbone sort of thing, where you're engaging this without knowing you are. Absolutely. I just thought it was an absolute winner, and it's great fun. So that's kind of a different, like 2 books in one. Superb. Had great fun with that one. Second one up, also from Simon & Schuster, is the, I only have a reading copy here, by Ariel Lawhorn's The Frozen River. Goodness me, Lawhorn writes a lot. I think her last one that I remember reading was Codename Helene. She's usually very biographical. So this one, she says herself, is a bit more of a departure. She's fictionalised a lot more, and for very good reason. Her author knows at the end of the book is worth reading at the end. Though it won't change, your understanding of the book if you actually read it first. But kind of a disclaimer, it is a absolutely mind-bogglingly interesting read, set in the 1780s in Maine. And Martha, based on or inspired by the diaries of Martha Ballard, who was a midwife. And I suppose I learned so much about the power or invested in her, what she was responsible for, what her, that her recording of events, she kept a day book, The Real Martha Ballard, and, every birth, every death, every identification by the mother of who the father may or may not be was her purview. She was responsible for that and was therefore a highly respected member of the community, and her voice carried huge weight, even in a court of law. And God knows their law courts back then were basically made up of prominent men who had, done well in the army or some such. There is everything in this. There's a body found in a frozen river. There's a young man who falls through the river trying to rescue it. There is a case, a sort of an alleged rape. And this is what Ballad is writing into. She's writing about what women went through, what women suffered, how women are silenced, and how her voice and her contribution to society meant that women were listened to. And that she was determined to get to the truth. She's with these women, she's accompanying them, she's got their trust, she brings their babies into the world. 1,000 births, and she never lost a mother, which in 1780s is quite phenomenal. But these women all trusted her, they told her their stories, and she knew how their child came to be. And I suppose this leads this fictional Martha Ballard, who has a stupendously good voice, into working out, was this rape allegation or accusation? What was the foundation behind it? The person who's been accused is quite, sort of high up and very, very difficult. Got his fingers in a lot of pies. So he's kind of, created a web of, I suppose, his own defence in a way. I almost found that society more enlightened than the way our current society is going, which is an eye-opener in a way. That's what historical fiction is really good. That's why I loved it, is because I saw, my gosh, she was almost more respected as a voice than almost any woman would be nowadays trying to defend some of these allegations against men. Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous read. It's more of a thriller. I mean, you think, oh my God, it's just historical. It's not, it's a thriller, it's a page turner. The people are glorious. Her children who have grown up all have their own love interests, so there's romance. Her own love story with her husband is just the most delightful piece of domestic sort of description. It was, and the scenery, Maine is glorious. Everything in there, you've got the natives, you've got unusual, and their wisdom, their plants, their herbs. You have travelling doctors, you have some of the wildlife, you have some of the practices and how a sawmill works. Absolutely, utterly fantastic. But as she says, she's not making it 100% historically. She's about 75% is historically accurate. And the last one up for today, because I think I'm going to get thundered on, which would be very appropriate for this book, which is Lucy Treloar's Days of Innocence and Wonder, and this comes to us from Picador. My word, I don't know why my brain keeps coming back to this book. It really, really, really does. It's one of those ones that's kind of hit me in the forehead, and I'm going, but what is it? And I had to sit and think about why I keep circling back to it, and what is this feeling of gorgeousness I have got for it, even though, well, the book starts in the shadow of something that potentially could be quite bleak. But what Treloar does, and this is the genius of writers, is she lifts what could have been a sort of trauma. It is based on the trauma from early childhood, but she's always kind of glancing off it. It's like light hitting water. You know there's something underneath it, but you're kind of not just dazzled by the surface, because that makes it superficial, and it's not. It's like it's punctuated by light all the way through. Her writing is this sort of airy. It lifts off the ground of where events have happened and takes us into a kind of, I wrote the line, hovers in the azure, which is kind of ethereal, but that's what it feels like. You've got a young woman, Till, who has had her friend walked off by some unknown man, and dreadful things have happened. But Treloar doesn't ask us to look at that. She looks at, how do I remake myself? How do I rebuild? How do I get so much of my childhood sort of erased or obliterated or covered up with this trauma? And how do I how do I clear that space and rewrite myself? And it's the most gloriously hopeful piece of writing in that she achieves this with this deftness, with these lean, intelligent sentences, and the pop of the landscape, the sort of delicate deference to the story that exists in place, which is not her story, but she gives the pages over to Indigenous voice or other people who've had their traumas in a small rural town in southern Australia. South Australia. I say that wrong every time. Oh my God, the dog. But, sorry Murph, I'm talking, but I don't know, I think it's a piece of genius. And I think that the important point of this is that how do we write stories that are difficult? He's going to knock the cameras over. How do we write them that are difficult, and how do we lift it? How do we make it all into something that really makes a difference to the way you're going to think about it? That we can address something like that and go, blooming heck, that was the most, everything sort of inconsequential becomes consequential. She's filled a basket with all the things that make up a life, and trauma is only a small part of that. Yes, it's kind of an undercurrent, but you become aware of the importance of little things and of big things and of keeping going and of, I don't know, what's going on in here. It's an intelligent, brilliant read about an intelligent and very resilient young woman who Velcroed me to her. I loved her so much. And I was rooting for her so much. I just felt that I couldn't leave her side throughout this whole novel. And for that alone, you have to read it. That's it.